Good morning. My name is Mike Evans. I'm a Colonel, United States Army, retired. I'm pleased to be doing the interview of Merle M. Metzler, a Staff Sergeant, World War II, U.S. Army. And today's date is Veterans Day, 11 November 2016. We're located in Ventura, California. Merle is a very close friend of ours. And in fact, my sons and I and my wife are all veterans, and we share many a moment with Merle. And the people attending this interview are, first off, Ed Lynch, who is the videographer, and there's Dorothy Metzler, who is the wife of Merle. And the purpose of the interview, of course, is to tell the story of Merle Metzler and his experiences in World War II with the 103rd Infantry Division. Just kind of starting, today is Veterans Day, 2016, an appropriate day for us to be interviewing Merle Metzler on his experience as a soldier in the Army that took on Europe and ended with the fall of the German Reich. One of the things we should note is that the war that he fought was basically through battles through many towns. We have a list here, which will be displayed. It's 77 towns that the 103rd Division went through in fighting during World War II. And it all started on November of '44 and ended with VE Day. So, Merle, let's talk a little bit about you as a young man. Could you tell us where were you born and when?
I was born in Saginaw, Michigan, May 21st, 1923.
Okay, and tell us about your folks and your uncles and children, or sisters, brothers.
Well, my dad was worked at the Melville Iron with the General Motors, where they made moldings for car parts and then Army parts, or Jeep parts and truck parts. And my father started out as a boss on the line and worked his way up to superintendent. And my mother, she did a lot of things, cleaning houses. And she and my dad on weekends would go to different houses and they hung wallpaper.
Oh, okay.
And that's about it for them.
Okay, then tell us about the kinds of jobs that you had prior to entering service.
Well, I started as, I guess, about 8 years old, working on farms, weeding sugar beets. What they'd do, they had a guy ahead of me with a hoe, and he'd call the blocker, and he'd take out a bunch, and then I was on my hands and knees following, and I'd weed them all out except one beet. And I did that, and then later on, as I got older, I worked for my uncle. He had a tire shop. After that, my mother's cousin that had a floor sanding business, and so I went to work with him sanding floors. So I did that for quite a while, and after that, that's when we started, when we went into the service.
Okay, so you're a timekeeper, etc.
Oh, yeah, I worked at the Melville Iron, where my dad worked.
The timekeeper.
The timekeeper, yeah.
Okay, the invasion of Europe by the Nazis, the bombing on Pearl Harbor has occurred, and at this point you're 20 years old. So at this point, why did you want to enlist in the Army, and when did you enlist?
I wanted to do my part, and my mother, my grandfather Holm came over on a boat from Germany when he was 9 years old. And anyway, my mother said to me, I want you to go over there and kill those damn Germans. So anyway, I wanted to enlist, and I really did enlist, but they put me down as a draftee
And
because
what
they
date
were
was
going to
that?
draft. That was in Michigan, in Saginaw,
And the date?
and the date was,
December
I
31st?
think it was December 31st, and I signed up and went in with two of my buddies. And
Okay.
never saw them again, of course. They separate you.
Right.
And we went to, I think it was Grand Rapids. No, Detroit. Detroit, where we got
Your
our
induction.
physical and all that sort of stuff.
Okay, and why did you enlist with your two buddies? Why? What did you think would be?
Well, I thought we'd be together,
Right.
but that never happened.
Oh, okay.
So,
And did both your buddies come home safe?
yes.
Okay, good. Okay, so now you've signed up. It's 1944. So where do you head for basic training?
Basic training in Camp Claiborne. We went down there by train.
And what state is that in?
That's in Louisiana.
Okay. And tell us a little bit about that, both the physical exertion, etc., and then some of the issues about bayonet practice and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, well, we went through the basic training just like everyone else. And part of our training, they had a sandy beach down below us. And that's where they had us do our bayonet practice. We were standing in the sand sometimes up to our ankles and trying to do all of that stuff. And we had our army overcoats on in a backpack. And then you're supposed to be doing bayonet practice with a... Anyway, it was a little bit on the rough side in that deep sand and everything. But we got through it.
Okay, so your basic training you had noted before was sometime between January of 44 and April of 44. What happened to most of the troops when you finished your basic training?
Well, actually, they were... Our company was going on maneuvers, and at that point, they pulled me out and sent me to Fort Benning for radio training.
Okay.
So,
And what did they expect you to do in radio training?
we did the, the telegraph and all of the letters of the alphabet, of course, that you have to
Right.
put in.
Now, were they expecting you at this point to become a section leader, for instance, because you had
Yes.
special training?
I was a section leader.
You were a section leader.
Right.
Okay, you'd already basically been promoted. And prior to deployment, who visited you?
What?
Who visited you at Fort Benning?
Oh, my mother and father visited when I
Okay,
was
they
at
came
Fort
down to
Benning.
see you before you
Yes.
left, not knowing if
Yeah.
you'd ever come back again. And who was working at that camp when you were down there that you knew? How about your uncle Ralph?
Oh no, he was at
Cleveland.
Camp Claiborne.
Camp Claiborne?
He was
Okay.
in engineering.
Okay. So you had, at least while you were at Claiborne, you had a relative there.
Yeah, my uncle Ralph Preem.
Okay. Tell me about how you adapted to military life. How was it?
Oh, I adapted to it very well.
Okay.
I had no problems.
Okay, because as you had said before, you wanted to go to war, and so
That's
you
right.
did everything. Tell us about how the exercise they added for eating at the dining facility.
They pulled the steps away and hung a pole up. And the steps were pulled away, and we'd have to go up the steps and then hand over hand on a pole to get into the mess hall. That was a necessity.
Okay, and when you left the mess hall, did you have to do the same?
Same way, you
Same
had
thing.
just reversed it.
Okay, so you were getting in good shape. Good.
Right.
And if you had any time off at Claiborne or elsewhere, what did you guys usually just do?
Oh, we'd go down to Dallas, and that was the main town down there to go to.
Okay.
And a lot of them went to Fort Worth, of course, but I always went into Dallas.
Okay, it's time with that you've left Fort Benning, and they've sent you to Camp Housie, and Housie is where?
Camp House. That's in Gainesville, Texas.
Gainesville, Texas. And at that point, you were to join the unit you'd stay with for the rest of the war.
Right.
And that's which is the unit again?
The 103rd Infantry Division.
Okay, and that's the one with the cactus on the patch,
Right, the
which
cactus.
is from Texas.
Okay.
Okay.
It's from New Mexico.
Oh, New Mexico. Oh, that's
Yeah.
even better. Okay. Now, what did you start training for? Where did they think you were going to go?
Well, they started off with netting and everything, so we thought we were going to go to Japan. That was a farce because after that, they actually got into training us for Europe.
Oh, okay. Okay. Now, you ended up at Housie in a convoy. You went there in June of 44. And you went to Dallas. Who did you happen to meet there?
My wife that I married,
Okay, and her name was?
Emma Jo Graham.
Okay, and you were married in December of what, 1943, before you left for the
Yes,
war?
yes.
Okay. All right, so now you're getting all this training with the division, and the months go by. It's the summer, June of 44 to September 44. When you were all through with your specialized training and you were the radio man, where did you take off for to deploy to Europe?
They took us by train to Camp Shanks in New Jersey.
Okay.
And we went on a ship from there.
Okay. And what's really important is, whose ship was this?
It was Mussolini's yacht, and it was converted
Into a troop ship?
into a troop ship.
Okay.
And of course, going over in the heavy seas, that yacht was just like a cork in the water. I mean, it was a rough trip.
Okay. And what did you see that was helping you as the ship went through the Atlantic Ocean? What was patrolling alongside of you?
Oh, they had our destroyers.
Okay. And they were protecting you
Oh
against?
yeah, they were circling constantly circling through the whole convoy, just making sure about if there were any U-boats anywhere.
Okay. And you were saying that when you got to the Azores, you saw what?
Oh, we saw a ship on the horizon burning.
Okay.
It was not from our unit, but nonetheless, it was a ship over there we saw
Right.
burning.
Torpedoed. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, tell us a little bit about, you're about to go through the Straits of Gibraltar,
Right.
and what do you see, and,
Well, we went along the coast of Africa, and we could actually see people over there. I mean, we were that close to the African border. And then, of course, they swung north, and we went into Marseille, France, is where we
and
deported.
you remember the date that you landed in Europe? September
I think it was
17th.
September 17th, if I
Right.
recall.
Right, 1944 at Marseille. Okay, and so what did they have you do once you got there?
Oh, we were taking stuff off the ship's supplies and that, and we were loading up. The French had these little pickup trucks, and the way they run, they burned wood for that was their fuel.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd load them up with whatever supplies we had there that we're sending up to the troops. And we'd load them up and they'd go up there.
And tell us what mean trick you used to do with them.
When we told them ready to go, we'd grab hold of the bumper and hold it, and they couldn't, they didn't have enough power to move it.
No big Chrysler or something, huh?
Then we'd finally release them and then move.
Okay. So you've been loading and unloading. Now at this time they decide that you're going to move north. Where did you take a troop train to?
Up to Lynn,
Leon?
yeah. And then from there, we marched into San Diego.
Okay, and what equipment were you carrying as an individual?
Well, we were carrying our radio, of course, and the telegraph set, and of course all of our other equipment.
Okay, and then the trucks followed with your duffel bags and that sort of
Yeah,
thing?
right.
Okay, what happened when you went through, in September, you went through Epinal? What happened to your unit?
Oh, and Epinal had been bombed out awful badly, and it was bad shape. And anyway, at that point, I don't know how the French did it, but anyway, they started shelling us.
Okay.
It didn't hit any of us, but I mean, it was nonetheless, it was close enough to where, it was
Right.
debris.
Yeah, these were
flying
the
around.
French troops that still were with the Vichy?
I think so.
Yeah, and you're part of the Germans. Okay. So at this time, you're getting to Epinal, and you have a young man that's in your unit that seems to follow you through the whole war. And what was his name and what was his problem?
His name was Hendershot. And actually, he was a little on a mentally disturbed point, and he should have never been in the service to start with, and he definitely shouldn't have been sent overseas.
Okay. And so, what did you have to make him do to practice, etc.?
The first sergeant had trouble ever finding him, and half the time they'd find him over at I Company peeling potatoes.
You like that better, huh?
Oh, I don't know. He was something else, that kid.
Okay, and he was carrying some telegraph items you mentioned, and you found him sitting on the bridge?
Oh, that's when we had, when we were going to San Diego, we were marching through there, and we had to cross a creek, and they had a wood path for us to go over. And we got about in the middle of it, and Hendershot was in front of me, and he sat down. He didn't want to move. So I had to kick him in the butt and get him moving to get across.
Okay. Now, at this time, you mentioned that nearby there was a German army post.
Yes.
And what happened there?
Oh, they had a fire going, I guess for heat, and they were over maybe 150 yards from us, something like that. And we had no problem. They didn't fire at us or anything. But going through there, we come across, there was 2 German soldiers, and they were face down, and I thought that they'd been shot. But some of the fellas behind decided they were going to poke them with a bayonet. Come to find out, they weren't at all. They were alive, and they'd got caught in there. And anyway, they sent them up front to S3 to be, interrogated.
Interrogated? Okay, good. So that was your first captures then?
Yeah,
Okay.
that was it.
So now we're still trucking along the road and we've come to San Diego. Tell us about your experience in San Diego.
We were, my driver and myself were billeted in the mayor's house. And we were pretty well wore out from the march and everything. We were tired. And we went to bed upstairs in the bedroom. And between us and outside, there was a closet, a closed closet that went across the front of it. And when we got up in the morning, the front porch was gone. They had dropped some mortars over there, and we didn't even hear it, didn't even feel it.
And it just blew off the front porch right by your head. Right?
Right in front of us, yeah.
Oh my God. Okay. And during the day, what did you happen to see with the Free French forces?
Oh, the Free French forces drove up to this house across from us, got out with their machine guns, went in the house, and the next thing we heard was some screaming, and then we heard the machine gun fire, and I guess they were what they call quislings.
Quislings, right, the spies for the Germans.
And they just went in there and they shot them.
Okay. Okay, so then once you leave Sandier, you're about to enter the Vosges forest.
Yeah, the Vosges Mountains.
Vosges Mountains,
Right.
which is the southern end of what would become the Battle of the Bulge within a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were in the Jeep with radios. What was happening with your radios?
Oh, they were being bugged by they were playing crazy organ music, and just to block out any communication we had.
Okay, so they jammed you with organ.
Oh yeah, they had us jammed awful bad.
Okay, and so then the next day there's a Nazi roadblock out there. Could you tell us
Yeah.
about that?
Well, during the night we heard an explosion down there. Didn't know what it was. And the next morning, we went down the hill and around a curve, and where that blockade was there, and they'd removed the blockade, but in moving it, my good friend from Missouri, his name was Elmo Gross. I looked over and I saw Elmo laying over there in a ditch. And what had happened when they were trying to move all of the logs and everything off of the roadblock, they didn't know, but it was booby-trapped. And the booby-trap went right off and just blew part of his stomach away.
Okay, so
And that was a very sad sight for me.
right.
That was the first one of our soldiers that I ever seen,
Oh, was killed. Wow.
You know.
Okay. So from then on, you mentioned as you went through these villages, kind of tell us what you were seeing.
Well,
Was it a clear picture that you would see, or was it starting to get a little blurred, all of this?
yeah,
Killing.
a lot of us getting blurred. But whenever we went into a town, well, when we're on the march against the Germans, whenever we go into a town, they had these 88s, and they'd fire in volumes of 3, and they'd hit the far end of the town, the other end of town, and then they'd drop one in the middle. That was just a pattern that they had all the time with those 88s. And then we would, in the morning, we'd move forward, and by that time, they'd move back into the next town, or maybe 2 towns back. And so we'd march forward till we hit the line again, and then we'd have engaged in some fighting. And then during the night, they'd pull back to another town or a second town. So then we'd go through the same process, and it was just the same thing one time after another.
Right,
And then whenever we'd go into a town, all of a sudden we got smart to the idea that they always put snipers up in the steeples. We'd go into a town, and all of a sudden we were getting picked off with the snipers. So from then on, whenever we moved into a town, we'd send a half-track up, and they'd blow the steeple,
oh,
blow the steeple off the church.
mm-hmm.
So that stopped that sort of an operation.
Right. Okay, at this time, there was some problems with your friend Hendershot.
Hendershot.
Hendershot. What did he do with the company commander?
Oh, well, he had his rifle, and somewhere or another his rifle went off, and the bullet hit a tree right alongside of the captain. So immediately the captain took his shells away from him. So he was just carrying an empty rifle. So anyway, it wasn't too long after that we were at, what was the name of that?
Epinal?
No, at some hill there. I
Oh,
forget.
509.
Oh, let's see, it's a,
509.
no, it wasn't that. Anyway, we'd been there a number of times. We were in the same town a couple. Anyway, Hendershot he was in kind of a low spot, and the Germans were firing a machine gun fire right over his head. And of course, he was screaming for help, help. And of course, his rifle wasn't any good to him. It didn't have any shells. And anyway, I tried to keep him under the wing, to kind of take care of him as much as I could. But anyway, so as soon as the firing stopped, and I figured that they were probably changing their roll of shells, I crawled over there and I pulled him out of the hole and got him out of that mess.
So you got him to safety and he lived.
Yeah.
And at that time you had seen lots of dead soldiers.
Oh, yeah.
And you commented about how they were laying there with their eyes open.
Yeah, laying with their eyes open, and some of them with glasses on. Yeah, it's an awful thing to see, but nonetheless part of war.
Right.
And anyway, it's...
Okay, so it's right before Thanksgiving now, and you're fighting at Hill 509 and you're trying to circle the Germans. What happened?
Well, the 2nd Battalion was supposed to come around, and they were going the south side, and it's supposed to come around and come up north, and we were supposed to come around and go south, and we're supposed to encircle them, and we'd have them encircled. And what happened was we made it, but they didn't. They ran into a lot of trouble, and they didn't make it to meet us. So we were sitting there behind the lines for a day and a half through one night, and we could see some soldiers down below, German soldiers. And they finally got the 2nd Battalion in shape again, and they come around, and that was Thanksgiving, so we went back to the campsite. And when we got back there, they had our kitchen. They pulled our kitchen up to give us Thanksgiving dinner.
Ah, okay. In the field, yeah. Did you have turkey and everything?
Yeah, they had the whole smear, the decorations and all.
Oh, that's awesome. Good. At least you felt comfortable there.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Now, on December 24th, you've moved through a fairly large number of towns. You've basically crossed the German border, and then you've gone back into France again. So on the 24th of December begins what is called the Battle of the Bulge, north of you in Bastogne, Belgium. And you're in Merlbach.
Merlbach.
Right, south end of it. And what were you supposed to do there as it was part of the Battle of the Bulge?
Well, we were supposed to protect the south flank, and we were told to hold it at all costs, because we were the anchor there at the bottom of the Bulge. And while we were there, well, the Germans were across, maybe 3/4 of a mile, something like that, across from us, and of course there was snow on the ground. And there was a railroad track went across, and they were on the other side of the railroad, and we could see them when they had guard duty, that whoever was out there, they were dressed in white, because of the snow. but they were jumping up and down, and of course you could see their face. And anyway, that was there. All we did there was run patrols. They run patrols, and so did we, back and forth. And we captured a couple of people and brought them back for interrogation.
Okay.
But at that point, I ended up with frozen feet,
Okay.
and they called an ambulance up and took me back to a hospital in France. And I was in there with 4 other guys, I think it was 3 or 4, and they all of us had frozen feet, and it was a crazy thing. But our treatment was at night. The nurses would come in and open the windows and uncover our feet. I don't know what that was all about, but that was the treatment they were giving us.
Okay.
So,
So the Battle of Sessenheim in January, you're still in the hospital and you missed that.
I missed that, and they said that the one company could feed the whole battalion. That's how bad Sessenheim was. And I missed that battle because that's in the hospital there.
Right. When was it at this time, when you were back in the forest, that you captured that officer and the gun?
Oh, that was later on.
Okay,
And we were billeted it was a heavily wooded area, and we were billeted in there. And I and a guy from Metzler, his name was Quandrid, we decided to go out and take a look at what was going on, around. And we saw 2 German officers standing there. They were about maybe 50 feet. And we looked around. We didn't see any soldiers anywhere. Just wondered what they were doing. I guess maybe they went ahead to kind of ahead of the troops to, figure out what was going on. Anyway, we walked up and they said, "Oh, thank you for surrendering to us." And I said, "I'm sorry, but it's the other way around. We have a whole battalion back here in the woods." So anyway, and that's where I picked up the 45,
the gun?
the pistol that I took off of the officer.
That holster and then the weapon is right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah,
Yes, that's the correct one, yeah.
Yeah, I took that off of the German officer, and we took them back into the woods and gave them to S3 for interrogation. Yeah.
So this was the weapon you captured from the German officer?
Yeah, from the German
His individual pistol, which is a .25 automatic.
And you can see it's got the swastika stamp in there. And
Let's hold this up a little bit
yeah,
so that can be seen. It's got the swastika still,
yeah,
and the eagle above it, etc.
yeah,
And it also carried an extra magazine for ammunition.
yeah.
So this was one of the many items, war items and fighting items that you picked up, because later on we'll share some of the rifles that you've
Yeah.
picked up,
No,
Mausers.
the rest of the stuff I got, I didn't take off anybody. It was the stuff that was laying there,
Right.
that-
As they surrendered, they dropped
yeah.
their guns.
Well, and some of them were dead, and their rifles were laying there, and I picked up several of them. So.
Okay, no, that's good, good. Okay, you missed that one, okay. Now, how do you get back to your unit? Are they crying for you?
Well, they had what they call a repo depot. It was where replacements, and some of them their organizations didn't want them back, I guess. But anyway, then they were sent to wherever they were needed. But of course, my company wanted me back there because I was ahead of the section. So when they notified them that I was out of the hospital, they sent a jeep back to pick me up and take me up to our company.
Okay, and that was, let's see, that's at Menshofen, and that's in February of '45. Right, okay. And at this time, you run into your good friend Hendershot again, and what is he doing this time?
Well, at this point, I guess he'd been through so much that they didn't know what to do with him. They had him on what they call, well, I forget what they called it. Anyway, he was
retrieval?
picking up dead American
The
soldiers.
KIAs, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that's what he was doing then, and I think that's what he did till the end.
Okay. So, yeah, and at that time you noted that was the last time you would see him until you were on a troop train going home.
Well, yeah, I saw him when he came back to the company to go home. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so at this time, your unit, and why don't you give us the correct name of your unit, the company, the battalion, etc.
Okay, it was Headquarters Company, 3rd Battalion, 411th Infantry,
Okay, and all part of
in the
7th Army.
103rd Division,
Okay,
7th Army.
7th Army, okay. So now you're about, it's the 18th of March and it's 1945. And the Corps of Engineers has built a bridge over the River Rhine. And what does your unit do?
Oh, well, we crossed it.
Across the Rhine, okay.
Crossed the Rhine.
Okay, and so at this point, through all these towns along the Rhine, from Speyer to Frankenthal, and it was, again, as you said, and were your days the same as they were before? Battles all the time?
Oh, yeah.
Every day it was fighting constantly and young men dying. Okay. You got to the town of Speyer, Speyer, and what famous thing did you find there?
The wine cellar.
Hey, very good. Okay.
And I mean, you talk about a wine cellar. That was the wine cellar of all wine cellars. And they had enough wine there, they were pulling out that every soldier in our outfit had a bottle of wine.
That's good. Got to celebrate.
Yeah.
Okay, now on the 11th of April in 45, you end up in Darmstadt. And what happened? Why were you stopping in Darmstadt?
They sent us back there to the rest area for 2 weeks.
Okay. You guys were worn out from having fought since January.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and what did you, you said you were billeted in a two-story house, and
Yeah.
where did you take baths?
Well, out in the courtyard, they had a big iron tub, and that's what they used to wash their clothes. Well, we used it. We put water in it, and we used it to bathe in and more or less soak ourselves.
Get all the dirt of combat off.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, yeah, many towns still to come that you would be fighting through.
Oh, yes.
From Bortenbach, Schorndorf, Hachbach, Kirchem, Lindorf, etc. Okay, so now on the 26th of April, the war is getting closer and closer, only you don't know it, neither does anybody else. You approach the town of Landsberg. What happens in Landsberg?
Okay, Landsberg, that's the town where Hitler was in prison years before.
Yeah, in the 30s, right?
And we found a big box there full of Mein Kampf books. I should have kept one, and I didn't. I don't know why I didn't. But anyway, it was full of those books. And in that same town was the prisoner of war camp.
Concentration camp?
Concentration camp. And all of these people were so thin, and some of them couldn't walk, some of them did walk. There was several of them that was walking around. But anyway, we were told, definitely do not feed these people. Don't give them anything, because the medics are coming up and they'll take care of it. And if you give them anything to eat, it may kill them. So you have to wait for the medics, and they know how to handle this situation. And you know how to nourish them and take care of them.
Right.
So anyway, from there, well, I guess that's not all that happened there, except we saw all
You
these
made a
people.
comment that they were so thin their arms looked like what?
Oh, their arms were just so thin they looked like poles that you hang
Right.
clothes on.
Poles, yeah, there was nothing there.
No.
You noted there was not any flesh at
Oh,
all.
you saw their bones. You could actually see their ribs. I mean, it was a horrible sight.
Okay. And at that point, you marched. The next town after Landsberg is Munich. And what do you find in Munich?
In Munich, we got into Munich. Of course, that was a concentration camp also. And we went in there and looked at their gas chambers and things. And then there was a railroad track over there, and there was a boxcar sitting there, and it had this full of bodies, dead bodies. Mm-hmm. And where they were going to take it, I don't know, probably somewhere to dump them in a big hole is probably what they were going to do. But
Or burn them
or burn them, whatever they were going to do. But anyway, that boxcar was sitting there, and the doors were open, and we'd see all those dead bodies in there.
Right. And this was the concentration camp at Dachau.
Yeah.
Dachau, the very famous one. Yeah. Okay. Now, in the next time, you're about to move out, moving further and further south, and you're in a convoy to Mittenwald. What happens on that convoy to Mittenwald?
That's where we met a lot of soldiers.
Right. And didn't you have an incident with Captain Weiss?
Yes. Well, that's right. That's after Captain Weiss. Captain Weiss was the captain of M Company, the heavy weapons company. And the colonel always wanted our Jeep behind him because we had the radio. He wanted to have radio contact. But Captain Weiss was also suck up anyway. And he always wanted to be behind the colonel. The colonel didn't want it that way, but that's the way it happened several times. In this particular time, I was pulling up to get behind the colonel and or my driver, and he pulled in front of me, and they had a half track ahead of us, and a half track went ahead, and then the colonel went ahead, and then Captain Weiss's Jeep went ahead, and they hit a mine. And the first thing I heard the explosion, and I looked up, and all I could see was the hood with the star on it, up in the air, probably about 35, maybe 40, 50 feet. And it blew his legs off, and it killed him. Right. And that would have been me if he hadn't been, you know, what he was doing.
Right. Okay, another tragedy.
Yeah.
Anyway, and now as you're going further and further into southern Germany, what do you start running into now?
Oh, troops of soldiers, divisions, the whole bit.
The
Nazis. They were coming up, and they were coming up and asking, where do we go? Where do we go? And we told them, well, so many miles back, there's a camp there, and that's where they're bringing all the soldiers into it. And they said, okay, so anyway, that's where they were headed. And there were, like I said, we even had one of them, it was a division of soldiers.
Right.
And then there were companies and the stragglers, but anyway, we told them where to go back.
Right, and what did you tell me that was unusual? You didn't even take their weapons?
We didn't take their weapons. They were still carrying weapons. We took nothing. I mean, too many soldiers. I mean, how are you going to handle that many? We just told them,
mile high.
Just go on back.
Right, okay. And you had no problems with them. They were just surrendering.
Oh no, they were ready to give up.
Right,
I mean,
they were glad
they knew it was the end of the war.
Well, that's good. Now you keep on going, and suddenly you're in Austria.
Yeah.
Gone through Innsbruck, etc. And where is it that you get to when you stop?
We stopped at Brenner Pass.
Okay, and why were you told to stop there?
Well, that was that was the end of the war for us, actually, when we tied up with General Clark.
Okay, Mark Clark is coming north through
Italy. And his soldiers were there at the border of Brenner Pass, and we tied up with him right down there.
Okay. And do you remember what town you went back to in Austria?
Yeah, Steinach.
Steinach, okay. So tell us about the end of the war. It's May 8th, 1945. What happens?
When we were in Steinach, we we drive back to Innsbruck, or the driver would go back and pick up a keg of beer,
Oh, okay.
bring it down, and we had they kept us busy with parades and had gatherings where we'd be instructed for things, going home, being released, and then at the parades, they said, "No, we want you to shine your shoes, get your uniforms in order, look like soldiers." Well, we said, "Fine, now how are we going to shine these shoes?" Because at that point, we had the shoes that were turned inside out.
Right, with the suede.
The leather was on the inside,
Right.
and the rough stuff was on the outside. Now, how are you going to put polish on that? But anyway, we got through that all right. They realized it was an impossibility to shine that rough stuff. But anyway, when we left there, I was sent to myself and a bunch of us. They kind of scattered us around, but I was sent to they had a bunch of camps there in France, names of cigarettes, and
You were at what, Philip Morris?
I was at Camp Philip Morris.
Philip Morris, okay.
Yeah. And that's where they started. I was with a group that went to the 45th Infantry, and they started training us, to join the 45th, and from there we were going to go to Japan. Well, in the meantime, of course, the war in Japan was over also.
Right, September 45.
They dropped the bomb, and that war ended. So at that point we were put on Liberty ships to go across the channel to England, and we were on a Liberty ship and ended in Tidworth, England, and we were there for about a week to 10 days. We got a chance to go up to London and look around, and Piccadilly Square, that sort of thing. And then we boarded a ship, the Aquitania, to come home.
Okay, and that was October of 45.
Right.
Okay, and now you arrive in the United States. Where do you end up going to?
Well,
To be discharged.
we ended in Fort Dix.
So now you've you've come home,
Yeah.
and now you're headed for Dallas, and then to Fort Sam Houston.
Yeah.
And at this time, Captain Mosley and Hendershot
Yeah.
happen to see. And what does this guy Hendershot say to the captain?
Well, anyway, there were four of us, and it was Hendershot, the captain, and a sergeant. It was from I forget what he was. He was a rifle company, I think. Anyway, we were sitting there, and Hendershot said to Captain Mosley, "Captain, you remember when I shot at you and missed?" I mean, this guy was something else, I'll tell you.
So what did you do when you got there?
Well, we got to Dallas, and Hendershot and I, we went into we were at the railroad station, and we went into the restroom to kind of clean up. And so I said, "Now, how much money you have with you?" And he showed me. I said, now, I want you to take $5. I'll lay $5 there. He said, okay. And he took $5. And I said, now take the rest of your money and put it in your pocket. And don't take it out for any reason. Do not take that money out. Leave it in your pocket. And you hand this, I don't know what the fee is to go home, but you hand him $5. And I'm
Like
sure
a
that'll
cab
more
driver or
that'll
something.
more than cover it. But anyway, just give this cab driver $5, and that's it. And don't touch the other money. I just kept repeating that to him to tell him, because Lord knows you know what the kid's going to do. So anyway, I guess he got home fine, but I put him in a cab and got rid of him.
And what happened later with the father?
Oh, the father called me
Okay.
and thanked me for taking care of his son.
Oh, that's great. Tell us a little bit about some of the friends you made there, Ted and Eddie and
Well,
Buddy.
Eddie Kleiss, he was my driver. And Ted Partinsky, he was a radio man for me. And we later on become friends with his whole family.
Okay.
I was at a 103rd Infantry Convention, and this lady who was a secretary to the mayor of Chicago was there, and she was at the desk, and she made an announcement. If Merle Metzler's in the crowd, I wish he'd raise his hand. And I was, of course, and I raised my hand. She said, when this is over, I want you to come up here to the desk. I want to talk to you. So I went up to the desk when it was all done and met this lady. And she said, my name is Partinsky. I'm Ted's wife's daughter.
Wow.
Anyway, she told me that her dad had passed away earlier, and he was a big Cub fan. In fact, they had him, at one point, they had him down on the ground with the microphones and all.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a famous kid with the Chicago Cubs.
Oh, really? Announcer?
Oh
Wow.
yeah, he went to all their games and everything, and they thought a whole lot of him.
Okay, and then you had a friend by the name of Buddy, and then Lloyd.
Oh, Lloyd Moen. Yeah, he was from Madison, Wisconsin. I forget the rest of them. It's been so long ago.
Right. But and you still keep in touch with some of them. The one that became the priest,
Yeah, Kobe.
Kobe, and he's the one that prepared this document.
He's the one that prepared that.
Right. So that you could trace exactly where you
Yeah.
went. I mean, mile by mile. My
I'm
goodness.
glad he did that.
Yeah.
And even the dates he
Yes.
has there.
Yeah, when you went into a village, came out of it, a burg, a dorf, right? Even crossing the Danube River and the Rhine and just everything. Wow.
Yes.
Okay. And now, did you get, war is tough for getting mail, but did you get mail from home?
Oh, yeah. I got a whole lot of mail from him.
Oh, okay. Okay.
In fact, I think I got more mail than any of them. But
Well,
anyway.
good.
And then when I was in grade school, our neighbor next door to us put the tag on me, because I was so short, called me Stub. And I thought, well, I'm going into the service, I'll get rid of that. No go. First thing you know, the mail's starting to come in, Stub Metzler.
So you had your nickname for the war.
So they picked it up, of course.
Okay.
That followed me right through.
Oh, my Lord. Wow. Okay, and of course, as you had said before, you fought almost every day, so there
Oh, yeah.
really wasn't time for recreation. Maybe play some cards or something, I guess. And
Only on the ship.
only on the ship.
Well, and then there were some guys that lay out a blanket and
Right.
yeah, do the gambling.
Right. Okay. When you returned home, now we've got you to Dallas. And then I think you said you ended up at Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio. And that,
When I
on
was
this
discharged.
date, in 1945, you are
Right.
discharged.
Right.
Okay, on Veterans Day. Okay, from Fort Sam. And then how do you get home from there? You didn't hitchhike. You caught a train.
No, I
and-
caught the train.
Okay, and back to Saginaw, Michigan.
No,
Okay.
I went back to Dallas.
Oh, to Dallas because you have a
Wife and a son.
wife and a son. Okay. All right. And then at that point, did you go back to Michigan then?
Yeah, we both went back to Michigan with our son.
Okay.
And incidentally, this Hendershot, he asked me, is your son a boy or a girl?
He was confused.
I mean, that gives you some more insight into Hendershot.
God. Okay, when you get back to Michigan, is that kind of when you started to get into the business that you've been doing all these years of accounting and so forth?
No, not right away.
Okay.
But I did. There was a high school teacher, and he owned the old grocery store there, and he put a hardware store in there. And he asked me if I'd run it for him. So I took that job over. I was doing that. And from there, I got into doing tax work, income taxes.
Oh, okay, okay.
I started into that. And then when we went back to Dallas, I was doing taxes. My father-in-law was he worked for the city of Dallas. He worked in the tax department. And so he did income taxes. He had a little building there across the street from the house. And he sold flowers and that. He had a bunch of flowers that he was growing there. And he also had this place where he did income taxes.
Okay,
So
and
I
then-
started working income taxes with him.
So that would be right after the war until now, because I know you still have been doing income tax to this very moment.
All these years since
Oh, right.
about 1950 on.
Wow, wow. Okay, let's talk a little bit about your family kind of thing with your wife, etc. It's just so it's part of the record. Your first wife is Emma Jo that you marry in Dallas, Texas.
Right.
Have a son, and that son was who? Merlin?
Merlin, yeah, Merlin Jr.
Merlin Jr., right. Okay, and how did that marriage go then?
Well, it went for 16 years, and she was a trollop.
Oh, goodness.
She was running all over the place. And so we got a divorce,
Uh-huh.
and I ended up with two of the kids, and her dad called. I was in Michigan then, and her dad called and said, Merlin, is there any way you can take the rest of these kids? He said, she's not taking care of them.
Oh, great.
And he said, you're sending her $250 a month, which I was doing. And that was a lot of money in those days. And as soon as she'd get that money, she'd take off somewhere and we wouldn't see her for maybe 15 days. And I have these kids to take care of. And I said, sure, I'll be tickled to death to take my kids.
Sure.
And I ended up with all five of them.
Okay, and so you raised all of them.
Yeah.
And then along the way you remarried?
Yeah, I remarried Myrtle Gilbert in Michigan.
And what year was that? Remember? It's all right.
Yeah, anyway. And, well, I was with Emma Jo 16 years. And then with Myrtle, we moved to California.
Mm.
I got a job with a fella that I'd known in Dallas, and he was there, and he owned what they call, it was a washer plant, washers for aircraft and
Oh, yeah. Okay.
different kind of washers. And he called me in Michigan and said he had a job for me. So that's how we ended up in California.
Oh, okay.
And then Merlin got cancer, and she passed away.
What year was that?
He's 79.
79, okay.
She passed away, and then Dorothy's husband had passed away, and Dorothy came in and was kind of in tears about losing her husband, and she was alone now. And anyway, so his name is Bob Johnson. He said, "I'll tell you what." He couldn't stand anybody around him crying or anything. That wasn't his cup of tea. He said, "Here, let me introduce you to Merle. He's over there in that other stall over there." So she came over, and I started telling her about my kids. And she's thinking, who gives a damn? Anyway, and then she was telling me about her 2 kids. And anyway, it was a short time after that, I decided, I like that lady. I'll get a hold of her. And I tried to find her name in the file cabinet, and I couldn't remember it. And the boss wouldn't tell me because he wanted to go with her, and he had a wife. But anyway, eventually they hired her. She worked for Kaiser. She was a nurse.
Oh.
And she worked for Kaiser, and they went on strike. So then Bob Johnson's wife, Virginia, she called Dorothy and said, "We'd like for you to come to work over here." So then that's how we met again. And then from there, we started dating.
Oh, and when did you two get married then?
We got married in August the 1st of 81.
Okay.
One day after Prince Charles and Diane got married.
Oh my goodness, how appropriate for a Brit. Okay. Now, why don't you tell me, how did you think your wartime experience has affected your life? What do you think about the idea of war?
Well, war is an awful thing, of course. But the war that we fought, we knew who we were fighting. I mean, there was no question about who we were fighting.
Right.
In these other wars, you don't know who you're fighting. And that's a sad thing. I mean, it could be a child that comes up and you think the little child is wonderful and has a gun. You know how that all goes.
Yes, sir.
It's a completely different war than the war we fought. Both of these wars, Vietnam and Korea, were different wars from what we.
Right. You fought the war we thought would end all wars.
Yeah.
Right.
So I feel sorry for the people in these right now that's fighting. Half the time you don't know who the enemy is.
Right. What are some of the life lessons you think you learned from the military that were important to you?
Oh, I learned a lot of things in the service. One thing you learn is cleanliness, even though we were pretty dirty sometimes.
Right.
But, and the discipline. It was all good, really. I mean, that part of it. And it sticks with you.
Right. Okay. Health-wise, you said looking out for yourself,
right.
discipline,
Right.
etc. Okay. In the very last part, we'd be talking about what message would you leave for future generations? Say 100 years from now, somebody is reviewing, just picking and choosing different veterans from the Library of Congress, the National Archives. What lesson would you like to leave for someone who is reviewing it at that time?
Well, number one, try not to get into any wars. That's for sure. And Like I was talking about the cleanliness and the discipline.
Right, but in case of war, when does it become necessary? As your final words?
Well, it would become necessary when your own country is at stake.
Okay. So
Not anybody else's country,
right,
unless they're really like England,
right,
you know, or France.
okay. And so basically you're trying to save our way of life.
Yes.
Right, okay. And then you also mentioned at one point, you said that it's how important it is to treat all people, no matter where you are, with respect.
That's right.
Okay, even your captured Germans or
Yeah, no matter who, yeah.
who it is. Okay. Now, is there anything we haven't discussed or something that should be added? Some point that is particularly inside you? We're going to, of course, talk to your charming wife, Dorothy, about her time in the British Army, but is there anything else you would like to add?
Not that I know of.
Okay, so you're comfortable with what we've said? And
Oh, yes.
we actually, your wife had said you talked about things you didn't even know about. And I didn't either, because we sit across each other and have a cup of tea and hadn't heard all of those things.
Well, I didn't discuss too much about war anyway.
War, right. Okay, well, thank you very much, Merle. Appreciate that.
Okay. Thank you.